Hello, and welcome to Adventures with Scars. I'm your host, Lauren Huffmaster. Adventures with Scars is a discussion on the invisible side effects of cancer, these emotional side effects that show up in a typical cancer experience. Last season, I presented my philosophy on the aspects of the cancer experience that are difficult to put into words. I tried to define what is invisible, and I presented a timeline on how we can heal from the trauma of cancer. In this second season, I'm going to talk with others, patients, survivors, co-survivors, anyone who's been impacted by cancer. And these discussions with survivors and co-survivors will help us all better understand the experience of cancer. Also, we want to know whether or not these invisible side effects are real. Do they exist? And are they typical? Today, I'm going to speak with Rachelle Jenio. Rachelle's been living with metastatic breast cancer for nearly 6 years. And Rachelle and I knew each other outside of cancer. We went to the same church. We even sat near each other, but we didn't know that both of us were walking through the same experiences on the same medications with the same doctors, because cancer is not something you can see on the outside sometimes, especially metastatic breast cancer. We can hide in the crowd. And so it was so exciting for me to meet Rachelle when we finally put the pieces together. And I've been so happy to walk with her through her journey for these last few years. So Rachelle, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Absolutely.
So we want to know your story. Tell us a little bit about your cancer story.
Well, it all started after my second child was born. I had her right before I was 40, so they kind of put off doing the mammogram. And so about a year after she was about a year and a half, I had my first mammogram, and it took a little longer than I thought it should. And then they said, we want to do an ultrasound. We see a little something. And I was by myself because I assumed this would be routine. And they just thought it was a clogged milk duct or something left over from having had my baby. And they came in with a folder after the ultrasound that had a little pink ribbon on it. Made me a little nervous. And they said, we see something we don't like. And that made me more nervous. And they said, we'd like to schedule you for a biopsy. So by myself, I went to my car and lost it. Called my husband, then called my OB, who was amazing and stepped in and said, we'll schedule your biopsy. I have a surgeon I already want you to talk to. And the ball rolled. And that started in October of 2017. And 4 weeks later, after having a biopsy, a meeting with the surgeon, a full body PET scan, meeting with the oncologist, and then an after hours meeting with the oncologist and my husband, I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. So it took about 4 weeks. It went really, really fast. And in situations like that, I kind of become an oak tree. So I just gather information and I'm very stoic. But definitely by week 4, I was very emotional. And the oncologist that I had was amazing. She sat down with us after hours, like I said, and sat down with my husband, answered all the questions we had. And I walked out with a plan and an attitude of that it's going to be okay. It affected my husband a little bit differently. He's very emotional, and his question to her was, are you going to treat her as if she's your sister, your spouse, your family? And my oncologist was amazing and said yes. And so I started a targeted therapy, which is just the pill form. And it went really well for about 3 years. And then we noticed that it was not working so well. My cancer numbers and markers started going up. We tried with a different type of targeted therapy, and it didn't seem to be working. I was slowly not able to breathe as well, and it was over the holidays, and stress can do that, and Christmas and everything. But the next the end of the winter, I ended up having to go on to chemotherapy. And fast forwarding from then to now, it had metastasis. Well, let me go back a little bit. So when I was diagnosed, I had the lump in my chest, my right breast, and I call it my mothership. And at that time in 2017, they didn't see a reason to remove it to make my diagnosis any better because it had already spread through my lymph nodes. It was in my spine, the vertebrae in my spine, so in my bones and in my liver. And all the targeted therapy took away everything except for the mothership. The mothership stayed just a little bit through the whole therapy, but because it wasn't growing and it was stable, they just left it. They didn't want to do any surgery. At that time, there was no research showing that taking it out would make it any better. So we left it. And when it did come back, it came back in my lungs. And they went and did another biopsy, and they found that it had either mutated to a different type of breast cancer, or I've had two types the whole time, two genomic types. And so the first type was the hormone positive HER2 negative, which is treated usually by the hormone therapy. And then this second time, I was diagnosed with triple negative. So what was in my lungs was slightly different and that's why it wasn't responding to the same treatment. So chemotherapy was the way to go. And then I did it for 6 months, and then I had a scan. My lungs were clear. Everything was great. 30 days later, I couldn't catch my breath again. And then I had fluid around my lungs. So now I had a pleural effusion. And so they went in and they took the fluid out. They tested it. It was still the triple negative, but now it was in the lining of my lung, around my lungs. So after the 30 days of clear, I back to chemo. And that one went well for a while. And then then we saw one of them, again, the chemotherapy, the cancer gets smart. So it says, I don't want to respond anymore. So we stack another chemo. So I've been stacking, and I think I just started, this is 2023, and I've started the 5th or 6th type of chemo medicine. And through that, I've had some chemo medicines that are great. One that I was on for almost a year before it started not responding. And then I just went through one with, it's in HER2, and the chemo was working well, but I did not do well with the side effects. It actually caused pneumonitis for me and really low blood counts. So 2023 has been a little rough. It's began growing again, this time in my bone marrow. So my blood counts have plummeted to a point where, so sorry, this is one of those things where, because it happens really fast, sometimes these things kind of overlap. So this year in February, again, I had the hard time breathing. This time the fluid was around my heart, and I had to have surgery. They cut a hole in the sac around my heart, took out the fluid, closed that back up. We thought I was doing good with the chemo that had started, and that chemo made my lungs inflame, and it's pneumonitis, which it can be fatal because it's not like you can take fluid out or anything like that. So back to the hospital for that, and also a bone marrow biopsy. So now the cancer has spread to the marrow of my bones. And what that did is it made my blood count so low that my platelets were at a point where if I bumped anything, they were afraid I was going to bleed out. So I was in the hospital for close to 3 weeks. trying to figure out what to do with my platelets and my hemoglobin. And the medicine, although it was working, was also killing my lungs. So oxygen. And that was after the heart surgery. So a lot of things going on all at once. And so now we figured out a way that I could do the blood transfusions, but stay home and then go to appointments and outpatient. Although I have to go 3 times a week, so I am tethered to my home. We can't leave for more than 2 days or 2.5 days. And again, a new chemotherapy that we're hoping will work now. And so we're kind of waiting through 2 or 3 cycles to figure out if it's doing what it needs to do with my bone marrow. Basically, it needs to go in, kill the cancer so that my bone marrow can regenerate on its own and make the hemoglobin that I need and the platelets that I need. And that's where I am now. New fun side effect is neuropathy, or I don't have the pain of neuropathy, but I have numbness that's starting in weakness. So we're going to see if that's transitory, or if now this chemo, if this is going to be the side effect, can I live with it? The side effect, is it going to get worse? Is it going to get better? So, almost 6 years in, it's honestly, this last 6 months has probably been the hardest. It's been 3 types of chemo, lots of hospital stay, way more than the beginning. And when all this started, I was hoping the targeted therapy would get me many more years before I got to this point. But with everything coming out, I do have to say that not the chemo I'm on now, but the last one that didn't work for me was actually not even released, I believe, for use beyond trials until the year I was actually diagnosed. So within 5 years, there's been all these other things that have come out, and I call it my alphabet. So for me, traveling down this road, I've used up A, B, C, D, but every time I move a letter down, I pray that there are more letters farther down the road. So that's my just the cancer journey itself of the disease and how it's progressed. But the mothership is gone. The chemo actually took that away. The ones in my bones will always stay there as scars. And now the only thing I'm dealing with is the marrow, but that's the most important, I feel like, because it's creating the blood that I need. So that makes it a little tougher.
That is, all of those treatments and all the things you just described. Yeah, when I think of you, I don't think of any of this. Rachelle, like when I talk to you, when I look on social media, when I see you in the community, none of this really shows up. There's so much more going on in your life. So how old are your kids right now?
They're 10 and 7.
10 and 7, and they've and you've had cancer since they were 4 and 2, 4 and 1.
4 and 1.5.
Yeah. So, and whenever I see you, you are surrounded by happy, bouncy, busy children, and your social media is filled with pictures of happy, bouncy, beautiful children. And you are living this vibrant motherhood, while going through all of these things that you just described that I would say most people don't even know you're walking through.
Yeah, it was easier to hide at the beginning. Number one, we didn't tell the children. I feel like at that time, actually, we didn't tell very many people, probably just my immediate family and my husband's immediate family. And a lot of it was not so much me. I'm a very open person, but it was actually my husband that requested that I keep it a little more quiet and off social media. And for us, keeping it off social media is okay for me. It doesn't help me to process or heal to have it out there. And for me, the only social media I'm really on is Facebook and maybe a little bit of Instagram. But I feel like it's my highlight reel. And because the internet is forever at this point, especially Facebook and posting pictures and things are infinite at this juncture and the way technology is. I wanted it to be a highlight reel, especially for my kids, so that they saw mom in pictures and they saw us with the cool things that we did. Because they'll remember the hard times on their own, and they were so young at that time, that I respected my husband's wishes, that I didn't go public with it. It only went by word of mouth, by people who kind of had the need to know. When I was initially diagnosed, I didn't lose my hair. I cut it because we thought I was going to. But other than that, I didn't look different. I didn't act different. I felt different. I figured out some things along the way with medicines and so on. Actually, something that I ended up sharing with my oncologist that she reviewed and ended up sharing with other patients, just through reading and research. And it wasn't until the first time I lost my hair, the first chemo treatment, that I had to tell my kids that at least I was going to be losing my hair. And but a lot of people didn't notice, even on social media. It was a time of year, when beanies were great. It was, winter and early spring, so I was able to hide it. And by the time it grew back long enough to have what I call intentional hairdo, people didn't notice that I had even gone through chemotherapy. Even people in person, um, even people in the neighborhood didn't really notice. They just thought I wore a lot of headbands, or put my hair back, or was wearing a lot of hats, or anything like that. It was very easy to hide. Um, and uh, and then through the other chemotherapies, I didn't lose my hair until last year. I had to start one, and I lost it, completely. So we had to tell the kids. We finally used the cancer word. And at that point, my kids were 9 and 6. We hadn't really used cancer in the house, just mom's medicine. And some days mom was really tired. And I was blessed enough to not have the hugging of the toilet bowl, and the other things were very hideable GI issues. So I just wouldn't eat certain things, or I wouldn't take certain things, and they didn't really notice, and people didn't really notice. Um, and until this, like I said, this last maybe 6 to 8 months, it's taken a very big toll on my body. Lost 60 pounds over since last summer, so since about 6 8 months. And people kind of started noticing, and now it's very noticeable, physically. But I kind of let my daughter pick my hair some days. Mom, wear your long hair. I would wear my hair is salt and pepper. She asked me to go back to brown, so now I have more brown options. Um, and we use it, and she still is very simple about the questions. We let them ask them at their age level. I don't hand them that anvil of mom has cancer, mom is doing this. But my son has had a few more questions, especially when I said I'm gonna lose my hair again. Why? Why do you have cancer? How did you get it? Um, but they are extremely amazingly resilient. And we've always told them, if there's a question that any of your friends ask, or you don't know how to answer, let them know that I'll talk to them or talk to their parents. And I'm very open about it. But yeah, we try and keep it as what I consider normal for my kids, keep them active. And we are blessed that my husband has a lot of flexibility in his job. So we're able to get them to their events, and what we, just like most families that have more than one kid, divide and conquer. So one kid has, cheer, one kid has football or baseball or basketball. You take this one, I'll take that one. We'll meet tonight and have dinner, or that kind of thing. So we do that a lot, and definitely, pictures and videos. But I've always kept my Facebook or my social media very very highlight reel, very fun. And actually, I had really not taken any photos of myself without head covering the first time I lost my hair. I have a couple, especially when it started growing back in, and I looked like my dad. We had the same hairdo. We took a couple just for fun, but I don't post those. Those are just for us. And this year I did take some pictures, especially when I was in the hospital, I didn't post them, but they're in my albums, so my kids will have them or see them in the future and remember those times. Um, but yeah, I still keep it very private. Just recently we went kind of public with it. But yeah,
So for
I
5
kind of got
years,
a little forced into the public aspect.
yes, you did. For 5 years, you were living with what many would consider a terminal disease, but you didn't tell your children, you didn't tell your friends, you didn't tell your community. So for you, cancer was invisible,
Yeah.
not just emotional side effects, but the experience, the actual physical aspects of cancer was an invisible thing that you kept to the side. Now, how did that feel? How did that feel for you?
It was tough. There were moments that were really tough. Like I said, it was really to respect my husband's wishes more than even my own. Um, but I did tell him that there were people that I was going to share it with, and he knew that. And it's not that I swore people to secrecy. Um, I didn't say this is a secret. You can't tell anybody. But I did ask that they kept it private too. And I do have to say, everybody respected that. No, but it was kind of tough because the people that I didn't share it with wouldn't know that I was having a bad day. That the night before I couldn't climb my stairs to sleep upstairs. That I had to sleep on the couch. I did that a lot the first 3 years. Actually, the first probably 2 years, and then I figured out why. That was the thing I shared with earlier, that I had done research. Why were some months so hard for me physically and others not? And that actually became a medicine thing. And I found out that um, generics of certain medicines, the additives are all FDA approved. However, every company can put different additives in as long as the medicine itself is the same. And I was actually reacting to the side effects of the fillers, not the actual medicine. So I found the brand that worked best for me, that gave me the least side effects, could still climb my stairs, I could still dance hula, I could do things, but I did have some physical restrictions. People didn't really notice. Um, but yeah, going back to that invisible part, um, it was there were some days that were really hard, and I would turn to the people who knew. And then I shared with people who needed to know. But that was really kind of tough because it made it a little bit isolating, in that I couldn't just say, I have cancer, it hurts today. And so sometimes that would come out, on my husband. But I knew that he really needed me not to scream that to the world. He wasn't ready emotionally, mentally. Um, he needed that, and so that was something I could give him through all of that, was being able to say, okay, I'll just keep it a little bit smaller. But yeah, it is invisible. It's a lot of times, um, yeah, just you want to scream it out. You want to just, here, this is what I got. Don't ask me why I can't climb the stairs today, or why you didn't see me last week at cheer practice or whatever. But yeah, so it was an invisible thing, and you just kind of live with it, and good days and bad. And I just kind of, chalked it up to, I have kids, I get tired. I mean, moms get tired. One kid, 12 kids. We all have mom tiredness. So, that happens. But yeah, there were some tough days.
And now that your stories sort of come out, so you just got nominated for sort of to be honored by the community, or because of your cancer experience. So everyone's going to know this is going to get pushed out big time for the next month. How does that feel? For you and your husband?
Well, it's very interesting because that particular group I have been in and out of as part of supporting other women in the community. And kind of actually from when it started, one of the big first supports was a friend of mine whose husband was going through a bone marrow biopsy and cancer, and I mean not biopsy, but disease and all of that. And I knew at that time that was very public. And so people had asked me who knew my situation, we can do this for you. We'd love to do this for you. And it was a very big no, very big, like, please do not, please, for as much as you want to, I'm asking you more not to. I knew that we were not in a place, my husband was not in a place mentally. We as a couple were not in a place to share that. In response to that, I supported the community. We donate, we share in the gifts that we've been blessed with. And just recently somebody asked, could they do this for me? And somehow in my heart, at that moment, I knew that throughout these last few months that he was ready and that it would be okay if I came home and told him that this happened, because it is still a drawing situation, so it might not have happened, which would have been okay too. But I knew that he was more ready, that it would be okay, because this has blown up a lot bigger than I thought it was, number one. And I wasn't really sure I actually waited 12 hours to tell him anyway. I came home and I waited until the next morning because I was like, oh my gosh, how is he going to react? Is he really ready? Do I think he's ready? I don't know. This is going to go social media. And although I'm not huge on social media myself, I knew that friends of friends or friends of these, and that he's not on social media at all. And that it would get back to him. And because we do live in a pretty small town, urban edge. And so I know a lot of people who know a lot of people who, and his boss happens to also live in our town. So it would eventually get back to him. But he was actually, and I was surprised and relieved that he was surprisingly okay with it. It actually lifted a weight for him that he's been carrying for almost 6 years. And that's that invisibility. For his invisibility, it helped him to, I think, self-process, because he's a fixer and he can't fix what I have. The last 6 months have been tough. He's had to take a lot of time off, be with the kids a lot without me. But he kind of, I think for him, it was, we talk about not just the people who are dealing with the cancer, but our caretakers or those people that it affects, and it affects him greatly. We're definitely a partnership. And so he always got tired of people never asking really how he was, or talking about, and he didn't really need that. It's not that he's antisocial, but it's not that he needed those conversations, but the fact that the first thing people would always ask is, how's Rachelle? And he gets tired of talking about it because he feels like it already shadows over our home life, because I'm the person living with it. He's the partner helping the person living with it. But now we go out into the public, and the thing people want to ask about is that. And he's like, we do other things. Ask us how the kids are. Ask us, what we're up to. Not just how is Rachelle doing all the time. And so that was part of that privacy, and that he didn't have to always answer that question. And now that people kind of know what's going on with me, kind of alleviated that, because people know what's going on with me. So they don't ask him. They just say, hey, how are you doing? Or, how's Rachelle? But then the conversation flips faster because they don't need the details. The details are out there. I still don't post on Facebook about me specifically. I figure if you want to know, you can ask me now. But I feel like he feels that weight lifted a little bit. So I think the invisibility for him has actually lifted. But going public, it's still small public. It's not, worldwide or even, statewide, but just going public on social media here locally is, pretty big. And so it's alleviated some of that weight for him too.
So I know this is sort of just happening, but knowing how that's made actually it better for him, not worse, do you wish that you hadn't held it back for quite so long?
No, I don't think he would have been ready. I think that um because the normalcy was a little bit easier at the beginning, um, we didn't have to really share with anybody because to everybody outside of us was pretty normal. Um, and then uh, I think this was the right timing. I I I think if I had done it earlier, it would have been, yeah, it wouldn't have sat well. And like I said, it just felt like now was okay. Now was okay. It needed to, because we didn't feel, I don't want to say not worthy, but because we were able to continue so normally with our everyday, we didn't have to, it this particular organization is, and it's what's happened in the last year, something that's been traumatic in the last short term. And people would ask me, 2 3 years in, and I was doing okay. So there wasn't a need, even a small need, for us to ask for help necessarily.
Right.
And even now, like I said, I feel very humbled, honestly a little embarrassed. I still, maybe I'm conditioned to keep it a little more quiet after all these years, um, or not ask for help. We're very independent too. And so we really lean on our faith and our trust in our belief that um, we will be taken care of, and the many blessings we have, we extend to others around us that we feel are in greater need than we are. It's just part of how we function individually and as a couple and as a family unit. So, and we tend to do it very quietly. It's just our way. And so, yeah, it wouldn't have fit our story if I had done it any earlier. I think it would have felt
Um,
very uncomfortable.
I think I just want to touch on two things. First of all, for anyone who's just being diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, just what Rachelle said, for multiple years, for 2 to 3 years, life was typical and nothing major shifted in her life. And I think this is a huge change in our expectations for metastatic breast cancer, for our expectations for cancer in general, that in today's time, like she said, there's so many new medications that if you are afraid, if you have any cancer and you're so afraid of the metastatic, the stage 4, that a fear of stage 4 is keeping you from living well, or if you're just diagnosed and your life is rocked and you can't find yourself, stable and steady again, listen to Rachelle. She said for years, no one knew and no one had to know, because her life was typical. She went to sports and she took her kids to school and she did all the things, and very little shifted in her life. And I think that's been my experience as well. I have my medication routines. Even today, when I'm on 4 different kinds of treatment all at one time, I still live a very typical life most of the time. I have one day that is completely dedicated to treatment, and the rest of the time is pretty good, right? And so I just want to encourage anyone who's walking this out or afraid of walking this out, like, check your fears, see what's real there to be cautious about, and what's just not, because there's a lot of space, even in the metastatic experience, for a quote unquote typical life. And so that's the first thing I want to point out. The second thing is, Rachelle is so classic. She listed like dozens of chemos she's been on, weeks in the hospital, all these things over the last 6 years, yet she still doesn't feel worthy to be honored or recognized. And I run into this almost all the time. everyone. It doesn't matter how much they have cancer. I always say, listen, just like pregnancy, you can't be a little pregnant or a lot pregnant. Like you can't have like a minor cancer incident or a major, like cancer is cancer is cancer. And yes, we all walk it out differently, but the impact, the emotional impact is the same for all of us. Like there is that check, right? That like wall you come up against and you say like, okay, like this is part of my life now. What happened next? And there's that check in ourselves and our emotions. Like there's that shift in our expectations for the future. There's that shift in our expectations in our relationships. There's a lot of shifting that happens even with little cancer. Like, I mean, there is no little cancer, but and here's Rachelle living with metastatic cancer, dozens of chemos, dozens of incidents with making these decisions and all these kinds of shifting in her life, in her everyday life. And yet 6 years later, she's like, I'm not really worthy of this. So I just want to say, like, we don't have to earn gifts. That's the beauty of a gift. If someone wants to do something beautiful for you, all you have to do is receive it. You don't have to earn it. And I say this to people who want to participate in adventure therapy, but don't feel worthy yet. Like they haven't quite earned enough badges in their cancer belt in order to receive a retreat or to engage, or they're not wise enough to like volunteer yet. Like, we don't need you to be perfect. This is a gift. It is a gift. All you have to do is receive it because you are already worthy. There's nothing more you need to do to be loved and to be supported. And so I just want to put that out for all of us because I say the same thing too. Like I haven't signed up for quite a few handful of free vacations in other organizations because I'm like, I don't know that if I'm quite there yet. Like I've only been living metastatic for like 8 years, but there'll be other years, and so it is a common response. I'm right there with you. I will tell you that right there. But at the same time, I just want to remind us all that sometimes life gives us a gift and we don't have to earn it. We can just receive it. And that's really important for us to know that we don't have to work for everything, right? There's good sometimes in life that's just there. Like flowers. We don't plant all the flowers that we get to experience. They grow and we just get to experience them sometimes. So I just want to encourage us all, wherever we are, whether it's cancer or not, like sometimes good things are just available, and let's just receive them and be okay with that and let us move on. I feel like this fierce independence that we're like, we have to embrace. Life is all about fierce independence, and it's better to go at it alone and all of these things, but life is actually richer the more we embrace others and let others embrace us. So thank you. I went on a little tirade, but I just want to encourage
Well,
all.
how long did it take me to accept adventure therapy as far as accepting anything from adventure therapy as opposed to giving? Or I guess at one time, one of the big, retailers online was they'd give a little bit of donation whenever you bought something. And I did that, and I signed up, adventure therapy. Whenever I buy on this, they'll get this one, 0.05% or whatever it is would go to adventure therapy. Or we'll come to an event or something. But I don't want to receive anything. I don't want to go on a retreat. I already paid for family pictures. Those kind of things. That how long did it take me to accept anything? And even and also my husband, we're fiercely independent, like you said. We're the oldest siblings on both sides of our family, so together we are known to do all the things. We organize all the things, we make sure all the things happen, all the nieces and nephews and everything gets organized. And even those little things of letting my sisters do stuff like cook at family events. I'm always the head chef, right? Even my mom will sit down and I'm the head chef, and just letting, and it's interesting that it actually took my husband to make me sit down, and my sisters, at events and say, I can't do it today. Like I will do this one thing that is whatever my specialty is or whatever. but you guys got to do the rest. I'm too tired. Like I would push myself, and because I'm the oldest, that's my job. I'm supposed to. I'm fiercely independent. Don't tell me I can't do something. Don't tell me I can't open the pickle jar. Because I will bang it till I crack it until, I'm going to open it. But yeah, it took 6 years for us to even be in a place to accept. And I think he's a little grateful this gift is just for women, and that he doesn't have to be there. But he's very emotional, and he's very private about that. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you are by nature someone who gives as opposed to I find greater joy in giving than receiving. I think sometimes we forget that there's other people who do that too. And so it's been a little bit easier for me to accept from others lately than to give, although I do. We receive, a big gift, and I already am thinking, how can I share this with people? But yeah, it's hard to say, because there's always, at the end of the day, there's always someone who's going through it worse, and there's always someone who's going through it better. And it's hard to find where you fit in that. And sometimes you're the worst, sometimes you're the better, sometimes you're somewhere in between.
Yeah, I think that it's sometimes to receive is an acknowledgement of our own limitations, right? Like
Yeah.
if I'm receiving this, that means I couldn't do it on my own. Whether it's like someone brings you a coffee or someone gives you $1,000, whatever it is, like to receive is, like you said, like it immediately turns like, how can I make this balance the scales? How can I give it away so we're all equal, right?
Right.
But to receive, especially for our husbands, I think to sit down and let people take care of us is an admitting, not defeat, but in some ways, some sort of defeat. Like I didn't fix it quick enough. And so now
Right.
other people have to get involved and help us out. And I just wish we could shift that, instead of admitting our own limitations, it is the acknowledgement that some things abound, like some things never run out, like love or compassion. And people want to love you through food, and people want to love you through taking care of your kids or honoring you in our community. And that is an expression of love, and that can abound, and that can become something that's so big that you can't ever replace.
Right.
But your love is abounding in other areas. And I think that the mind shift here is task oriented, like being and doing, right? I can never do enough to give back what that organization is going to give you. Like I can never do it, but I can be someone who enriches other people's lives. And so that emotional deposit they're giving me gets passed around, right? So
Right.
it's this balance of this mental shift of sort of balancing the scales of life. Maybe karma has gotten into us so deeply we don't even realize that we have this expectation for ourselves to always like give as much as we receive. But I think it's important for us to embrace what is infinite, what is abounding, and really, some things are there. There are beautiful things that will never run out. And I think you've always given that away so well that now our community wants to give you things that will support you in the ways you are sort of becoming depleted now, just in support and love and things like this. So it is an interesting mindset, and what triggers that puts off in us, because I'm an oldest child too. So if someone like, I actually have a very distinct memory. When I was in college, I went to this camp and I was asked to come to work. And so I was there working like a good first child. And someone said, we're going to go through the buffet, but I want to do everything for you in this buffet line. So we're walking through a buffet. So we're talking about maybe 90 seconds. I don't know how long, but that person held my tray. They served my tray. They got my drink. They sat me down. They pulled the chair out. It was the most awkward 90 seconds of my life.
That
right?
was so really weird too.
I could not do it. I was like reaching over them and like almost knocking the tray over and making it so much harder for them to just scoop food and hand me a tray. Like I couldn't do it. But it has become this like reminder and that person did it because I gave up a whole week to come and help minister and take care of all these kids, and they wanted to serve me for 90 seconds and I couldn't let them do that. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think we value it is this independence, but it's also just this statement that we are our identity, going back to identity, that my identity is that I'm an only child. I'm going to fix everything I can for everybody I can, and I'm going to do it till I've emptied myself every single day. And that is my identity. And cancer makes that identity shift, right?
Yeah.
What
It,
empties me at the end of the day is a lot. It's gonna deplete a lot faster than it did 10 years ago, right?
oh yeah.
And so this identity shifting that's happening in you and in your husband, saying we are doing everything we can, and yet we're like running out real quick, whether
Yeah.
it's emotional strength or physical strength or financial strength or anything. And that is this significant identity shift that's happening. The beautiful thing is you've invested your lives in people and in a community. So you have a whole community rallying to come and be that strength for you, right? To give you what they can give to help support you in this way. And I love that. This organization is one of my favorite pictures of community, because it is strangers helping others who are just in need in a moment. And I'm so happy for you that you get chosen, but I know it's hard to receive. Your identity is as a giver. You said this, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
um, and now your identity has to shift. Your expectations have to shift to be like, it's okay to receive. There's nothing wrong in receiving, right? It is
Yeah.
an expression of love. And my father had to teach me that. He said, people want to help you and want to love you, but you have to let them. And by
Yeah.
rejecting their help, you're rejecting their love, because that's all that they can do right now for you in this moment.
Yeah.
And it really had to make me sort of step back and become softer toward being honest with where I could use support.
Yeah.
Um,
It definitely cancer forces you in, I think, into places that you didn't think you'd have to be. Um, and even like you said, there is no small cancer, there is no big cancer. It's all cancer. Through this journey, because there are people who know my situation, who knew before, they would come, those who were also like me, more quiet about it. And they're like, oh, but it's nothing like what you have. I said, it's cancer. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter if if you have it like I do, or if you have something that you can just take off. The word itself comes with this monster. And uh I mean, I don't know how public this is, but I have three siblings, three sisters, and during COVID, one was also diagnosed. Um, she caught a different stage, and hers is a different genomic type. So she's in full remission. But she had to go through treatment during COVID, which is super isolating. And they battled it through all that. And maybe she'll be able to share her story with you as well. But it's cancer is cancer. And I think I affected somebody really greatly, because they actually shared that, um, when they told me that, oh, it's completely treatable, it's just going to take time and this and that and the other. So it doesn't matter. Cancer is cancer. And when you hear that word, um, especially when you're a go-getter, independent, I'll do it myself, I can do this, we can do this, whatever it's it's hard to say I need help. And then when you do finally surrender to that, um, there are weights lifted, but still, they're still in the back of my head. I'm still I'm very humbled and I'm very grateful. But yet there's things like that I put off. Like I probably need some help around the house. But I'm putting it off because that means I have to ask somebody to come to my house and do it. That kind of thing. I'm trying to make it more business like, but it does it's tough. It changes. You have to, and then there's some months where things are great and you're gonna be fine and you're gonna feel okay. You're like, oh, maybe I don't need this anymore. Um, and then it shifts again. And for some people, being able to go out and volunteer helps them, you know, balance the receiving and then the giving. For some people, it's just talking to somebody on their couch or um, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely kind of changes how you share your identity with others outside of you once you shift inside. You know,
Definitely.
but yeah, it's definitely. But cancer is definitely something that I from the beginning didn't matter if it was big or small. That word in and of itself, like I said, that's why I don't hand that anvil to my children yet. In time, we'll build those pieces for them at their age and at the rate that they want to carry it. I think my son will carry it a little bit faster. Not only is he older, but just the way he's built emotionally. Doesn't mean my children care either way, less or more because of it. It's just that they are different personalities and they need to carry it differently. And they will carry it together, as a unit, as my children. Um, and I hope that I only have to give them little pieces at a time. So, but so far, and they ask now because I have more side effects, and so I tell them more, and we just go on.
So we've already spoken through your story. You mentioned isolation for sure. We've talked a little bit about shifting identities. Did you experience fear in your cancer story and journey?
Oh, fear every day,
Okay,
every
just
day,
making
every day. I think probably I think the two biggest ones for me personally are the isolation. Because it's not just isolation, physical isolation. It's emotional isolation, right? And not even just because I was respecting my husband's wishes. I mean, if I really needed to talk to somebody or tell somebody, I was doing it. And I would share that with him so he would know it was happening, and there was no hiding it from him, or even fear of that he would get angry, or even if he did, or he was, oh, why did you tell them? Well, because I needed to, and okay. Um, so there was no. Um, so the isolation is just because uh, cancer in and of itself is it's just ugly. It's an ugly word. People don't want to talk about it. It causes fear in other people. It can trigger other people for their thing. Although it can be a big bonding thing, like you and I. It's interesting. I had heard a lot about. I knew we have quite a few mutual friends. I had heard your story. I knew your story before I even met you. Um, but we didn't meet for whatever reason, and we literally live, a town away from each other, go to the same church, and all those things. But the fear started at the very beginning, from the beginning of my story, that the white binder with the pink ribbon thing. Um, Fear of what's going to happen to my body, fear of how am I going to handle it, fear of what's going to happen to my family, what's going to happen to my relationship, fear of not that I might be gone, but people are left behind. I never fear death. I fear the leaving behind of people. Um, and just the fear of waiting for the next thing to fall down. especially with metastatic breast cancer, you're always waiting for the next treatment to stop working. The fear of it going somewhere where you can't stop it. Um, the fear of handing too much to my kids at one time, too much of the worry. You're 10. You should be worried about where the basketball is going, not if mom's hair is falling out. Um, the fear of, yeah, just what's going to happen tomorrow. What's going to break tomorrow. Um, and yeah, fear is probably the heaviest burden I carry. Identity shift. I feel like my mom always talked about every decade you're a little different. Hopefully you grow up a little bit more from 20 to 30 or 30 to 40 or however you like to do that. You hope you grow up or mature or, learn something every decade, because your body's going to fall apart a little bit more every decade. Mine just happened to go a lot faster between 30 and 40. But fear is the biggest one. And I think probably why this last 6 to 8 months has been hardest is because the fear has been more in the foreground, not so much hidden behind the other two. The other two, I feel like isolation sometimes and identity shift happens slower and are a little more gentle. But fear is, it's more palpable for me. And that's the one that, every little thing in my body, oh, I lost my voice. Is it because I was cheering at a basketball tournament? Or is it because now I have fluid on my heart again? So the fear of something shifted in my body. Or today I woke up with a watery eye. So is that a chemo side effect, or did I poke myself with my eyeliner? I don't know. So it's kind of constant. And I know for me, before after my diagnosis, I had my ovaries removed, and so it shifted me fully into full menopause. I never had anxiety before. That was never part of my identity. But over the last 6 years, my anxiety has grown to where I can actually feel today's not going to be a good day. I have a lot of anxiety about whatever something is going to happen. But fear is it's recent, even more so than before, and just what's going to happen next, and just the fear of not knowing, the fear of the unknown, especially I think for metastatic breast cancer, because everybody's journey is a little different. And you read about these great stories. Oh, I've been living with it for 15 years, 30 years. Even when I was diagnosed, and I'm not sure exactly what year your MBC was diagnosed, at that point, paperwork's, and research still said 5-ish years. And I know that at that time they were doing research that it was growing already to closer to a decade, closer to 15 years, just because there was so much coming out at that time in the late teens as far as hormone therapies and better treatment for MBC. But it's still a small fraction of breast cancer in particular, and of the long-term cancers that people are living with. And the fear of running out of letters of the alphabet, that's huge. Fear of not being able to hide it anymore. That's kind of ended. But just the fear of not being able to do what I do, just not being able to be the mom that I want to be. Even this weekend, for example, went somewhere and I had to come back. And so my son had to miss out, and the fear that he would miss something, and he did. He missed something pretty big. but the fear that he wouldn't be able to handle it. And when he found out, he was like, "Oh, that's really cool for, his group." Um, and my husband said, "Are you sad you missed it?" And he said, "Yeah, but that's okay. We did really well." And I was like, "How is my kid who's 10 more mature than I am?" And I literally spent the whole day in fear that he would be angry at me. And he didn't even cross his mind. And I was just like, that's amazing. But just fear, it's huge. It's probably for me the hardest part of what I'm dealing with is the fear of ending up in the hospital again for 3 weeks. Um, and for some reason this spring it was every President's Day weekend, St. Patrick's Day weekend. I missed Easter with my family. Um, although I had everything ready and everything was great. And it went off without a hitch. I didn't get to be there. But fear is probably the biggest one I deal with now. And I think it shifts too. Sometimes it's going to be, the identity shift when you're going through that. And then sometimes it changes to, the fear. Sometimes it changes, I'm in the hospital, I'm isolated. That was the hardest part for me. Um, and then once I got home, the fear of, okay, am I going to be able to keep up with this outpatient thing so that I can somewhat get back to normal? Um, and now having kind of to change my identity again because now I'm going to need probably some help. That's very humbling. Um, and then the fear that what's the next thing? What's the next thing that's going to happen? I have small goals. I want to be able to leave the house. I want to be able to go on vacation for 4 days instead of 2.5. Um, but the fear of what if we're on vacation and then something happens and I'm not in a spot where I can get the help I need. So, it's this wave. And but yeah, fear is palpable right now. Um, and that's a tough thing for me to because I've never been a fearful person or an anxious person. Anxiety, I know I have that I never had before. And, I know that that is a typical hormonal actually thing. Um, that's why, sometimes we see our aging parents or our aging loved ones, we're thinking, wow, that's something they would have never worried about. When I was a kid, I didn't care about that. We just kind of went through it. But now they're 40 years later and you're 40 years later, and all of a sudden you go, and because I have the unique experience of being physically in the same place as, let's say, my mom, hormonally, I understand why she has more anxiety now that about things that she wouldn't have worried about 30 years ago. Well, yeah, she can't help it. Um, I can't help it. It literally is a physical thing. Um, as opposed one of those physical things that my cancer has done to my body. It doesn't do it to everybody, but it has done to my body. And at the same time, now I could share it with people who are starting this journey that I'm on and say, this might happen to you. Don't fear it as it comes. Know that it will. And however you need to handle it, because nobody told me that was part of it. Nobody told me um, that I would have that would happen. Um, but now knowing and having educated myself, I advocate for others to educate themselves about those things. Those are my two big words: is education and advocation. And that's kind of what I've been sharing with people who are dealing with cancer or themselves or with loved ones. That cancer is cancer. You need to educate yourself and advocate for yourself. And for me, that helps mitigate some of the fear because then I'm also educating myself and advocating for my friends or those people that ask for that. And advocating, I mean, advocating with their doctors and nurses telling their doctors, nurses, caretakers, whatever fingers are in those pies, what they want out of their treatment. And so that helps me kind of mitigate my fear too by educating myself. I do a ton of reading. I even read all the scientific papers. I have a degree in science and dietetics and those kind of things. So reading all the medical terminology is easy for me. And uh, and that way, when something happens, I stand up for myself and kind of together with my team. And that way I'm not so fearful. I don't have to ask, well, why am I getting this medicine? Why do I have to go have blood infusions 3 times a week? Or people who just don't ask at all. Sometimes I think fear shuts people down. And so they say, oh, well, that's what the doctor says I have to do. Um, okay, so let's educate and make sure that that's really what you want and really what you want to do. And if it's not, let's advocate for what you want, you know? So, but fear is huge. I would say that's the biggest thing I struggle with now. Um, Especially kind of like it's a form of PTSD these last 2 months, I think. So when I do have like, oh, today I have a runny nose. Why do I have a runny nose? Is it going to turn into a 24-hour bloody nose? Please don't, those kind of fears. Small, but impactful every day.
I just I appreciate all of that because fear is not something we talk about. We don't put it on, like, we don't put it on our social media. We don't bring it up over coffee very often. Fear is not something that we're bringing out into the open. And so everything you just said is something all of us have experienced at one time or another. And I would just say that fear is typical. So your fear, your experience with fear is typical. Most people impacted by cancer have experienced palpable, I can use it a lot, but palpable fear. I mean, that is something that is typical response to cancer. And then that fear turns into shame because we don't know if we are doing something wrong with this. And then that turns into more fear and it just grows and grows. And so thank you for everything you said, because this is my heart, that everyone who listens will know what it feels like to have cancer. Even if you look like the perfect, beautiful family for 5 years on the outside and nobody knew, this is what you're turning inside of you, right? This is what you're
Yeah.
actually thinking about, you're dealing with. And it's been invisible, but I want that others who are dealing with this to know they're not alone.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. You're not doing it wrong. This is just something that happens inside of us. And we have to find tools. We have to do something to move forward, to help it from growing, to help fear not to become a culture in our home that we pass on to our kids, right? We have to
Right.
figure out tools, and talking about it is a really good way to start. So thank you so much. I always end conversations with gifts. Is there a gift that cancer has given you? And so with this, some people think I'm crazy, but in cancer, there are things we can experience that we would not have experienced otherwise, and good things. Of course, we experience a lot of bad, but is there one thing you can think of, a story or something that is a gift of cancer that you received because of your cancer experience?
Um, I don't know if it's so much a gift. Well, I guess it is. Um, I've always been family oriented. That's a given. Um, but I think it made two gifts, honestly. And I touched on one earlier, and that was the gift of education and advocacy. Um, I've always been somebody who reads a lot, but the gift of being able to um, mature quicker, I think, in telling people and advocating for myself, not just within cancer, but in my life in general, being able to say no to things that are too much for me or say, yes, I can do that. Um, Knowing my limitations, that's a gift, because otherwise you empty more than you receive. So that gift, and like I said, being able now to share that gift with others. And the other gift is, honestly, not, and a lot of people say this, oh, I live for today, but really truly living for today is tough, because you want to plan for the future, but you save up all that time for retirement or for a big vacation, and sometimes you just have to pull the trigger and say, we're going to do it. And I don't care if I have to pay it off after we get back. But doing those things, that gift of making decisions a little faster. And it's been joyful, because uh, I think for our family, instead of saying, okay, we'll save up and we'll do it then, well, put off doing the little things around the house and just go do the big thing. Um, so that the gift of living in the now is really living in the now, not just appreciating today, but uh, yeah, just those two gifts of the discernment of what's really important. And so, uh, you know, I think that those are gifts that cancer gives you, despite all the heavy things that come behind it. The gift of being able to discern, yeah, let's do it. Let's really do it. Let's just pull the trigger, spend the extra few, whatever it is, or but yeah, those fun things, the highlight reel, um, because honestly, people say, "Oh, I don't want to regret. I'm going to do it today," and most people still put it off. And it's just human nature. We put it off till it's more convenient, till you saved up a little bit more, um, till the credit card is clear or whatever it is. But honestly, uh, just the gift of, I know it sounds cheesy, but it's really not. It's very hard to do. Um, the gift of making decisions and kind of pushing, like my spouse and I, like, oh, we'll do the vacation in the spring. If we had waited to do the vacation we did in the fall or the spring, we couldn't have done it. So we have that memory, and my kids are like, let's do it again. Let's do it again. And so instead of saying, oh, we'll do it next year, we're going to push it and we're going to do it this year, because I don't know what next spring is going to look like. I really don't. So let's do it now. We're going to do it. Um, so those two gifts have been huge for me. Just being able to make the split decision of let's do it, and then also the gift of being able um, to teach others how to advocate for ourselves in this journey, of life, and for me, in the journey of life with cancer as part of it. And uh, uh, and uh, and actually, now that we're talking about gifts, I have so many. I'm a weirdo like that. That something so awful I can actually use every day in the gift of probably growing closer with my spouse, and just even in an emotional way, uh, as a couple, and you know, being able to grow together and meet each other emotionally in a better place than I think we might have had cancer not been part of it. Um, yeah, so it's funny, like, if I had to write a gifts and a, I don't know, what is the other side of gifts, things that cancer has taken from me. I've always just been one of those people that I will find a gift out of the horribleness of it. What can what good did it give me, or good will it give me? And so yeah, those are my two biggest things, I think.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much. So I just want to thank you, Rochelle, for encouraging us with your story, for being honest and demonstrating what parenting with cancer looks like and how we compromise to make sure cancer experiences the right way for our families as much as it is for us. And we make decisions for the unit, not just always just the patient. And thank you so much for telling us your unique story about how it was you kept your story quiet for so long, and now you're sort of coming out in the community and letting everyone know. But the different challenges and different seasons. I think this is all just a beautiful expression of how cancer is different for everyone. But yet at the heart of it, we have so much in common. We are broken in the same ways, and many times. And I just want to say, if conversation has been meaningful to anyone listening, please check out our other episodes. We have amazing stories, amazing women and men telling their stories of their cancer journey. And if you want to dig a little deeper and check out other resources, check out adventuretherapyfoundation.org. We have videos and education and blogs and lots of opportunities for you to learn more about how what you're experiencing with cancer or someone you love is experiencing with cancer is probably a typical response. They're not the only one experiencing it, and neither are you. So we want to acknowledge you, and everything that we do is supposed to acknowledge, encourage you, and help you find tools for walking through cancer and coming out and walking through the process of healing as well. So thank you for listening to Adventures with Scars.